Hello, Agile people who listen to this podcast. I'm sorry, I'm totally out of witty things to refer to the audience as. So today you are the Agile people who listen to this podcast. I'm very glad that you're listening to this podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Integrity Inspired Solutions, where we build software in an agile manner day in and day out. You know, as I've picked topics for this podcast, I've tried to alternate between very specific, concrete, practical topics, and then ones that are a little more about principles, a little more about overarching thoughts that apply to a lot of agile practices, even though they don't specifically spell out new techniques or tools or things that you might have. And today is one of those. In fact, I would go so far to say that today's podcast topic really applies to life in general in a lot of ways, although the examples that I'm going to be using tie it back into agile stuff. And if you're at all a lot like me, I'm very sorry. Also, I hope that you appreciate the fact that sometimes we talk about specific techniques, but sometimes it is good to just kind of have a frame of reference that's larger than that. I teach a martial arts class, and I often tell my students, if I teach you a technique, I've taught you a technique, but if I teach you a principle, I've taught you a dozen techniques, because that principle applies in all kinds of situations, whether you've been taught specifically what to do or not. You know what works and you know what doesn't. So today I want to talk about 3 kinds of obstacles that come up in our Agile journey. Like I said, I'm specifically going to talk about Agile stuff, but really I think this is true for most of life. So if you find broader applications in this, good. I hope that encourages you. I do, and I hope they're useful to you that way as well. One thing that I like to get across about obstacles is we need to think about obstacles as not necessarily things that stop us, but rather they are the way. They are the things that we use to get to where we need to go. They present themselves as impediments, but they are also the tools that we use to get to what the next thing is. For example, if I'm running around and I come to a wall, that wall may stop my forward progress, but also by climbing that wall, then I might get to a higher elevation and I might find my progress after that is much, much easier because I had to climb that wall first. Especially in agility, if nowhere else, we need to think about obstacles as the pathway. They are the stones in the river that we step on to get progressively further and further along. Yes, temporarily, they are impediments and delays, but we really couldn't move forward without them. And we need to have that mindset because as we're building product, there's a lot of things that people might look at as impediments or even straight up failures that really are the mechanisms by which we ultimately find success. They are not things in the way. They are the things that have to be there. We have to hit that obstacle to use it to find what the right direction is. And so I'm going to talk about 3 different obstacles today. You can probably think of more, but I'm going to talk about 3 types that occur to me. The first kind of obstacle I want to talk about is an obstacle that demands perseverance. There are some obstacles that you can only clear through repeated and dedicated effort. Usually these obstacles are something that you need to get better at. You're just not really good at it right now. And so it's an obstacle until you can get better at that thing, until you can rise to the occasion. And so the way forward is just dedicated persistence. You keep at it, you keep at it, you keep at it. For example, if I decide that I want to be good at shooting baskets, and I go outside and I go to a basketball goal and I take my very first basketball shot ever, I'm probably going to miss. And I don't want to go, well, I guess this is impossible, right? No, it's not impossible. I just need to shoot again and again and again and again and again and again. And I'm probably going to miss a lot, but eventually I'm going to make a basket. Eventually I'm going to range in, and the more I do it, the better I will become. And then my total lack of basketball ability will not be the obstacle that it used to be. In fact, it was the mechanism by which I got good at basketball. An example of this in Agile practice might be if your team does something like test-driven development. Usually when teams first start any practice, and I'm just using TDD as an example, they're not going to be great at it, right? It's going to be very difficult. They're not going to write great tests. They might write tests and then try to write the code and they don't line up. Or they may be like, I don't really know how to do this. Maybe I'll write the code first and then write the test. It's just not gonna be great, probably the very first time your team tries to do something that they've never done before, especially something like that. Well, that's an obstacle, right? And you might look at that obstacle and be like, okay, well, I guess TDD isn't really for us. Maybe, but I think what that obstacle is telling you is here's an area that you actually need to do more. A lot of times in our practice, the things that are painful, the things that we're not very good at, you just need to do them more. You know, if you start lifting weights for the first time, that's gonna suck, right? And the solution is you have to keep lifting weights. Now, sometimes people will, helpfully or not, point out that quote that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. In some contexts, that quote has a lot of truth to it. But in other contexts, that quote can be completely wrong. There are many things in life where the only way to get a different result is to do the same thing over and over and over again, because as you do, you're going to get better and better. You're going to become more and more familiar. You're going to learn more and more what works and what doesn't by doing the same thing over and over and over again. Eventually, you're going to start making baskets if you keep shooting. Eventually, if you ask enough people out, someone's going to say yes. Man, I hope that's how it works for sure. At least that's what I'm banking on right now. So that's the first kind of obstacle, is where perseverance is the answer. There are some dangers with persevering with certain things. For example, you might end up getting better at things you should not get better at. A good example of this is upfront estimations. So we might estimate a certain body of work and say, yeah, we'll get that done in 6 months. We don't get it done in 6 months. And you're like, dang it, we did not do a good job of upfront estimating. We did not get enough details. We did not do enough upfront planning. Let's try it again and plan more. Let's debate more. Let's look for other kinds of measures and see if we can get a better estimate for that 6 months. And then you do it again and you're like, dang it, that estimate was wrong too. And so you just keep spending more and more time and more effort trying to get these better big upfront plans or these better big upfront estimates. So you're actually investing time in getting better at the wrong thing. You're getting better at a low value activity. So before you decide that perseverance is the way through your obstacle, make sure you do a little bit of a gut check and be like, is this something I actually need to get better at? Or is this actually something that I'm just doing wrong? This is just not the right path to go down no matter what. And getting better at it is actually not going to help me very much. Another potential danger with perseverance obstacles is the sunk cost fallacy. Sometimes we persevere not because we should, but because we have already spent so much. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's our emotional investment. It's really hard for us to walk away from things that we've already invested something in, whatever that thing is. And sometimes you just gotta. Sometimes the right answer is to stop persevering, right? And you may lose some money, you may lose some time. It may emotionally hurt to walk away from that thing. But sometimes just because you have put time and resources into something doesn't mean you should keep going with it. And that leads me to obstacle number 2, the obstacles that are best met by stopping, by just stopping cold, or at the very least, stopping what you're currently doing, right? In nature, we know that sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, things have to die in order for new life to spring up, right? If everything lived forever all the time, we would run out of resources. We would run out of planet, right? We would run out of so many things. The world would have to fundamentally change its nature in order for that to work. We know that things have to die so new things can happen. Old leaves have to fall off the trees so new leaves can arise. Elderly people have to pass on so that new people can be born and have resources to live. This is just the way our world works, at least right now. And this is true with other things that come up in life. Sometimes things just have to stop. Sometimes we just have to close the book. Sometimes things just have to end. So just like the perseverance obstacles showed you, hey, there's a way forward, but you're going to need to dedicate some effort, and we're going to improve you through this obstacle. There are other obstacles that are telling you, hey, you're going down completely the wrong road. And putting more effort into it is not what you want to do. This is just the wrong way. Stop, turn around, invest this time, invest these resources somewhere else. So one example of this might be if we put an MVP out and the market doesn't respond. Let's say that we're going to build the next Twitter competitor, only we're going to do it right? Because we know. And so we put our first MVP out there. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Our product is not as good. People don't like it. The UI UX is bad. We are not doing our key functionality very well. The market hates it. So should we keep investing in that product? Probably not. Now, that doesn't mean we get out of the product game. That doesn't even necessarily mean we give up on our dream of making a Twitter competitor, but it does mean, hey, this is not the way. This is not the path, right? And we need to stop what we're doing and not keep trying to make this work, not keep throwing bad money after bad money. So some obstacles are there just to tell us that it's time to quit. It's time to end. And that is okay. We have a culture sometimes that tells us we should never quit, right? We should never give up. Sometimes that is exactly what you should be doing. Sometimes you should exactly stop. History is full of examples of people that we all wish would have stopped at some point, right? Don't be that person. When it is time to draw that chapter to a close, draw that chapter to a close. Now, there are some dangers that come with this obstacle too. One danger is to diagnose this too early. Sometimes we stop too soon. Sometimes the obstacle is really a perseverance obstacle, but because it's painful or we get initial resistance, then we bail. I had a guy come to my martial arts class one time, and I was showing them a technique, and he tried to do it a couple of times. He wasn't really very good at it, and he just quit. And I said, why'd you quit practice? And he said, well, Bruce Lee says that if a technique is no good, you should get rid of it. Well, Bruce Lee was right, but Bruce Lee was also Bruce Lee, right? He could probably tell pretty quickly if a technique was going to work for him or not. Somebody's first day of martial arts class, they're not in that position. The reason the technique didn't work for him wasn't because the technique was bad, it was because he was terrible at it. And this was really a perseverance obstacle, but too early, he diagnosed it as a sign that he should stop. So that's one potential danger with these obstacles. But another danger is that we will hold off due to the pain involved with letting go. This is pretty closely related to the sunk cost fallacy. It applies to all kinds of things in life. I mean, I don't mean to get too personal, but if you sit and reflect, you can probably think of various things in your life, whether they are relationships or jobs or other kinds of life decisions. And you were like, I really held on to those things longer than I needed to because it just seemed like it would be very painful to stop. Or I would lose so much if I stopped. Or it would be so scary or so disruptive to stop. We have all done this, right? And that is a danger of one of these obstacles. It's telling us to stop, but stopping just seems so fundamentally unattractive that we just can't bring ourselves to do it, and we just hold on for a lot longer than we need to. And this is a pretty good segue into the last kind of obstacle I want to talk about. Some obstacles tell us we need to persevere. Some obstacles tell us we're going down the wrong path and we need to turn around. Some obstacles are telling us we have to change. Now, this can be one of the trickiest obstacles to diagnose and deal with because it has elements of both of the other two. A lot of times it has the resistance level of an obstacle that's telling us to stop, but we can also see glimmers of the way forward. Like it doesn't have to be this way. We could probably make this work, kind of like an obstacle that demands perseverance from us. So these can be very, very tricky obstacles. They can also be tricky because the change may be the way we approach the obstacle, like we may have to change our tactics. Marketing plan A didn't work out, so we need to pivot to marketing plan B. MVP 1 didn't work out so well, so we need to pivot the product to a new idea. Sometimes changing our tactics is what needs to happen, but sometimes we need to change ourselves. And those are the trickiest and most difficult obstacles to deal with. So here's an example. Let's say your company has decided that you want to be more agile, and you've read about different agile practices, and you've heard about these daily stand-ups or daily scrums if you're doing scrum. And you decide you're going to do that. So your team does these daily stand-ups, and you do them for a week, and you're like, this is just a waste of time, right? Every time someone gives their update, it has nothing to do with anyone else's update. Everyone's just kind of bored. It turns into an update for the project manager, almost like a one-on-one. It's just we have everyone standing in the same room. This is just a waste of time. Let's quit doing stand-ups. Okay, but the thing is, the stand-up isn't painful because it's useless. It's painful because you need to change, because your organization needs to change. You need to change the way that you're doing work so that your team is approaching work as a team, so that when they do talk about what they're doing that day and they are talking about their plan for attack, it does involve other people. It does concern other people very much so. And you also need to change the way that your organization thinks about those daily stand-ups. They're for your team to plan, right? They're not for your project managers to get their status updates. They're for your team to plan the day. So the fact that the stand-ups were painful for you, that they weren't working for you, it's not a problem with the stand-ups. Sorry, it's you. They can be very effective. Are there contexts where stand-ups are not useful? Sure, absolutely. But before we jump to that conclusion, we first have to take a look at ourselves and think, hey, maybe it's us. It's like that demotivational poster, the one common element to all of your failed relationships is you, right? Now, I don't want to be that pessimistic, but the fact is sometimes we have to take a long, hard look at ourselves. There are a couple of dangers with this obstacle too. One is, like I said before, change obstacles are easily misdiagnosed as one of the other two, because oftentimes we're feeling a high level of resistance, which would seem to indicate that maybe we should stop. Right? Maybe we should stop doing daily stand-ups. Maybe we should stop trying to break things into user stories. This is painful. This is hard. It's not working out. Let's just quit. We obviously went down the wrong path here. Very easy to misdiagnose those things or to think of them as a perseverance thing. Let's just keep doing what we were doing, but do more of it, right? Do it harder. It's very easy to think of change obstacles in that way because they have characteristics of both. But with change obstacles, neither of those is an acceptable solution. The only way forward is we need to change our tactics or potentially even change ourselves. The other danger with this obstacle is, man, this is really hard. Obstacles that require you to change the way that you think about yourself or the way you have approached an issue, especially if you are pretty competent at this thing or you have a certain image of yourself being a certain way, this is just hard. It is hard to admit that you are wrong. It is hard to identify areas that you need to change. That's why we have to listen to people tell us. That's why we have to listen for people to give us feedback, right? That's when somebody tells you, hey, you said something offensive. You don't go, no, I didn't. You go, what did I say that was offensive and why? So you can get that feedback, right? Maybe you did say something offensive. How would you know if somebody didn't tell you, right? And that's just hard. It's hard to hear that feedback. It's hard to come to grips with a situation telling us that what we thought was right just wasn't. It's difficult. It's difficult to admit and it's difficult to do. But I'm telling you, that's where the magic is, right? That's where the rewards are. The leaders that can see that they've taken you down a wrong road and they turn the ship around so that you can head in the right direction, those are the leaders that you want in your organization. You want people who can identify quickly, hey, going down this path isn't right. We need to change. Right? We need to change things about ourselves and we need to change our tactics. In fact, I would argue that's what being agile is really all about. And if that's not your bag, if that's not your thing, then why are you trying to be agile at all? Why are you listening to this podcast other than the fact that it has one of the best looking podcast hosts in podcast history? I get that. Okay. But this is what Agile is all about. How can we discover the things that need to change quickly and how can we change those things as quickly as possible? So in your Agile journey or your life in general, the next time you run into an impediment or an obstacle, it's going to hurt, but I want you to think for a minute. What is this obstacle trying to tell you? Is it trying to tell you you need to keep pushing forward, that you need to keep persevering in order to come out the other side? Is it telling you that there's just nothing salvageable about this? It's just time to bring it to a close. It's just time to stop. Or is it telling you maybe that most valuable piece of feedback that you could ever possibly get? And that is that there is a way forward, but I may need to change first. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.